You will not remember the last hour and a half of what you have just seen. You will forget the contents of this movie.
What We Do in the Shadows is Taika Waititi's third feature-length film, released in 2014. He co-directed it with Jermaine Clement, the guy from Eagle vs. Shark and one of the members of Fly the Conchords.
I'm the mother flippin'.
It is a black comedy about a group of vampires sharing a flat in Wellington, New Zealand. It is made in a mockumentary style, similar to The Office and District 9.
About something that you
We wanted to make a
really
documentary
document.
about vampires, but there were no real vampires.
So we had to fake the entire thing.
This format makes the film so interesting, as interactions with the cameraman become a running joke in the film. It also makes the cinematography very unique, with most of the shots being handheld with a shaky cam. And even though the concept of the film is very ridiculous, the mockumentary format brings some legitimacy to the film and makes the events in the movie feel so much more real. This is based on a short film that Taika and Clement made in 2005 called Interviews with Some Vampires, the title being a reference to Neil Jordan's film An Interview with a Vampire. This short is very similar to the final product, with the same concept of a vampire flat, the same actors as the feature length, and even some of the soundtrack is used in the final version.
It was just an experiment, really, to see what it would be like. We interviewed the vampire characters. We didn't have the werewolf characters yet, things like that. And just the parts we liked, we stretched out, or we kept the things that we liked. You know, the characters that we thought would be interesting, we gave them a bigger story.
The short is very low budget though, looking like it's made over a weekend with a couple of mates. The costumes and props look like they were bought straight from a thrift shop.
What up? I got a big cock. I'm just pumped. I bought some shit from a thrift shop.
It seems like there was a lot of heart put into this film, but it doesn't really compare to Taika's short film Two Cars, One Night. The actors in the feature-length film were really fun and interesting. The two directors played vampires in the flat, Taika being very timid and motherly towards the other flat members, and Clement being very promiscuous and getting into trouble. The third vampire is played by Johnny Bra. Bra's character is kind of the wildcard character, doing ridiculous things all the time, with the audience not really knowing what he's going to do next. All three main characters played off well against each other, all having a mixture of love and resentment towards each other, incorporating the feelings that people generally have towards their flatmates. A lot of the dialogue was improvised for this film, which I'm not usually a big fan of, as I feel that improv humor cannot be crafted as well as pre-written jokes, making a less humorous experience. This is not the case for this movie though, as it is so hilarious. I feel like the improv made the film feel so much more real, because when a character would say some strange improvised line, we would also be getting the first time reaction from other actors, sometimes making their reactions feel funnier than the actual joke. I would compare the improvisation in this movie to films like Borat and Bruno, opposed to films like Ghostbusters 2016, which consists of mostly improvised comedy. All the side characters were really enjoyable as well. One I really liked was Rhys Darby playing a werewolf. Rhys Darby is a famous New Zealand comedian who was in the Flight of the Conchords TV show and the modern day Jumanji movies. He's really enjoyable and memorable in this film.
Don't swear.
Sorry,
We're werewolves.
Not swear.
What are we?
Werewolves, not swear.
Every time I watch this film, I'm waiting for Darby's few scenes. I wish he was in this movie more. This movie could have been done so much better if he was the third vampire in the flat instead of Johnny Bra, who feels like the weakest member of the cast and gives it the least memorable performance. What I didn't expect was to be praising this movie for its practical effects. They use a lot of effects to make the vampires hover in the air, and even though it is clear that they are suspended from ropes, it is very fun to watch. I really like it when films use inexpensive practical effects, which come across as charming, opposed to using inexpensive CG, which come across as lazy and incompetent. There is some unimpressive CG in this film though, when characters transform into bats, that I'm not a huge fan of. I wish it was done more practically. The best practical effect was a spinning room that they'd set up so characters could look like they were running up and down the walls and on the roof.
Revolving room, so we could do a New Zealand version of Inception.
It is very impressive, especially since this is made on a small budget. I think the score could have been improved though, as it wasn't very memorable. I did really like the use of the song You're Dead by Nora Tanega in the beginning of the film. Overall, I do really like this film. 4 stars. It's not Taika's best film, but I do think it's one of his funniest. Always makes me laugh no matter how many times I've seen it. There are 2 spin-off shows based on this movie, the first being a shitty American remake of the film. Why does America always have to remake good things that are made in other countries? The Office, The Inbetweeners, apparently a Parasite movie is being made by Netflix. Do they realize that other countries are allowed to make good movies? The second is a New Zealand show called Wellington Paranormal. It is based off of 2 police characters that we see in What We Do in the Shadows, and follows their police life as they discover paranormal activity happening in Wellington, New Zealand. Now this show does seem like it has some heart in it. It doesn't seem like it's just riding off the coattails of the feature, and is trying to become its own thing. I've only seen the first season of it, but I would recommend it. A good spot of fun. Both are produced by Taika and Clement.
You hungry?
That's a silly question, isn't it? Look at you.
Ricky Baker, now you are 13 years old. You are a teenager and you're as good as gold.
In 2016, Taika released his latest Kiwi film, Hunt for the Water People. It stars Sam Neill and Julian Dennison and is about a troublemaker orphan and his foster dad being on the run from the New Zealand police, having to hide out in the bush. It is about Kiwi determination and to never give up.
The celebration of the, the Kiwi spirit, the spirit of adventure, the idea that we've always loved the good story about an underdog and the renegade and, the person who stands up for their rights. And I think coming from a tiny country, we're the last bastion down here in New Zealand, we've always tried to prove ourselves.
The strongest part of this film is the two lead actors. Sam Neill does his best performance since Jurassic Park. He's come a long way from scaring kids with a dinosaur talent, and now he's scaring kids with a gun. How times have changed. His character Heck can only be described as a good old Kiwi bloke. He's very quiet and mysterious, answering most questions with just a grunt. I really like his big beard that he has, looking like a real bushman. Julian Dennison is really good in this. Good child actors are very rare, but Taika has shown repeatedly that he knows how to direct kids. I do really think that Taika's direction is what makes Dennison's role so good, as Dennison didn't give that great of a performance in Deadpool 2, making me think that the change in the director is a contributing factor. I don't want to diminish his performance though, as I did really enjoy it in this movie, bringing a fun juvenile atmosphere to this film. These two actors had great on-screen chemistry, having funny back and forths, as well as having a strong emotional bond. There are lots of great side characters, my favourite being Rachel House's character. House plays a child protective service worker, who's trying to track down Dennison's character and wants to send him to juvie. She keeps repeating the motto, "No child left behind," which is a reference to an old US education policy that wasn't considered very good.
No child left behind. No child left behind. No child left behind.
This movie may be even more Kiwi than Boy was. There are countless cameos in this film, from famous news anchors to sportsmen to famous Kiwi actors.
There's a lot of great cameos in Water People.
Oh yeah.
Reese Darby, Oscar Kitely. What happened to us? Hey, Taika, where's our, we would have played a tree.
You guys are too big for us.
Too big for us. Tell Taika Waititi to stuff in a shitty movie. We're too busy filming pranks, mate.
It was really fun to see all these people in the film, and adds an extra level of enjoyment. The dialogue was also very Kiwi, similar to the Kiwi dialogue in Boy.
Big egg. What are you doing, egg? Hello, egg. Typical egg. Help you, egg.
Slang specific to New Zealand was used, meaning that I'm sure it was very strange to watch this movie from an international perspective.
This interview is Scucks. Scucks come from Wellington, and Wellington is Scucks.
I feel like it would be like watching Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange, not being able to understand the NASDAQ language used. The cinematography is very impressive, with a lot of interesting shots. There are some great time-lapse shots that remind me of Taika's short film 2 Cars 1 Night, yet again building off the short to take inspiration for his feature films. This was Taika's biggest budgeted film yet, with a $2.5 million budget, and it felt like it. At the end of the film, there is a huge car chase scene with tanks and police cars.
Heavily supported by the New Zealand Army and the police.
I think that apart from The Lord of the Rings, it must be the most impressive New Zealand stunt work.
That's what you do when you have car chases in a movie. You have to flip over a police car. You have to. It's the law.
It's hard for me to even criticize this film. It is the highest grossing film in New Zealand, and it's not hard to imagine why. It is pretty phenomenal. 5-star film. I would even say that this is the best movie made in New Zealand, and that's saying something, seeing I'm actually from Middle Earth.
So Taika, are you coming into the US to film more because we want you to be a household name?
Someone in the US is asking if I'm coming into the country to film more. Is it someone from immigration?
Hello, my name is Taika Waititi, director, actor. Welcome to Thor Ragnarok.
In 2017, Taika released his first Hollywood film, Thor Ragnarok. This is the third Thor movie about an ancient Norse god who is trying to learn how to become a good ruler of his people. This is the 17th movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I would say it's one of the best. This movie was a big change for Taika, who had only made small independent films from New Zealand. This was one of the biggest blockbusters of the year, with a $180 million budget. When I originally heard that Taika was making this film, I got very worried, as I got flashbacks to when Edgar Wright quit working on Ant-Man because of creative differences with the studio. It's always seemed to me that Marvel Studios likes to keep a tight grip on their movies, not allowing the director the freedom to thrive. But that doesn't seem like the case for Thor Ragnarok. The entire feel of this movie feels exactly like a big budget Taika film should feel like. It is fun, light-hearted, and absolutely hilarious. The two main pluses for this movie were the set design and the dialogue. The set design was everything I could have wanted from a movie that was set on another planet. It was so stylized and fun, and had so mumuch colour filling the screen. Look at these shots from Thor 2, and tell me that it doesn't look so boring and uninterested. The entire movie was so dark and gloomy, with nothing that piqued my fancy. Taika seemed to take inspiration from James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy for this, as that was the first real fun Marvel movie with heaps of colour and interesting set pieces. And this movie is just hilarious. It is jam-packed with comedy, making it more of a comedy film than an action film.
Most of these studio films, these blockbusters, the jokes that you hear were written about a year before they started shooting. You know, in a boardroom with a couple of dudes all patting each other on the back for coming up with a quip. I use the script as a suggestion. So when we turn up to set, it's like, how do we make this funnier, and how do we drag the joke on and keep it going?
Taika brought his Kiwi humour for this movie, making this movie such a unique part of the MCU.
It does have a very New Zealand or British or Australian flavour to it, humour-wise. The jokes do go on, and they go on to the point beyond when they're funny, and then we can even push them a bit further until they become funny again.
Taika played a CG character called Korg in this film, and he was one of the best characters. Korg is a big rock creature with a Kiwi accent that aids Thor on his journey throughout the film.
I just started playing with different accents and different characters and stuff, and that one just sort of came out. Yeah, we just found it really funny coming from down there.
He was actually in Avengers Endgame because he was such a good character. Korg spin-off when? This is one of the best Marvel movies out there.
There's other movies.
Which goes to show that letting a director do what they want with their films leads to success. A thing that this movie does right that most other MCU movies don't do is reference the other films. When I watch these movies, I'm always like, where are the other Avengers? Why aren't they helping out in this time of crisis? This movie addresses this by A, being sent on another planet so they cannot receive aid, and B, actually having two other Avengers in the film to help elaborate the fact that this is a shared universe. And even though this is one of the best Marvel movies, it's not too groundbreaking. Other than the humour, nothing really in the script wowed me. Chris Hemsworth and Mark Ruffalo were okay in this, but I feel like they were way better in other films. I did really like the soundtrack though, being filled with such energetic music, reminding me again of the Guardians of the Galaxy. The score was very bland and forgettable though, like most other Marvel movies. If you haven't already, go watch Every Frame of Painting's Marvel Symphonic Universe video for more detail about Marvel's crappy scores. Overall, I do really enjoy this movie, but it's not very groundbreaking. 3.5 stars. I do think this is Taika's worst movie, and by worst, I mean not as amazing as his other projects.
I don't know if I learned anything.
Really?
I don't know. I feel like I sort of brought so much of myself and my style of filmmaking to this that I've completely changed the cinematic landscape forevermore.
Never again will films be the same.
It is still very fun and enjoyable, and I can't wait for Thor 4, which Taika has in pre-production right now.
This is something like the Holocaust.
JoJo Rabbit was Taika's latest film that he released in 2019. I really like it, 4 stars. If you want more commentary, watch my 2020 Oscars prediction video. Yes, I said Oscars. It was nominated for 6 Oscars, ultimately only getting 1 for Best Adapted Screenplay.
This is really great, and I dedicate this to all the Indigenous kids in the world who want to do art and dance and write stories. We are the original storytellers, and we can make it here as well. Thank you. Kia ora.
So happy that Taika has gotten some recognition from the mainstream circles, and I can see this Oscar win benefiting his future work. I did have it a 4.5 stars, but since rewatching his filmography, I've decided to lower the ranking so that it's more in line with the rest of his filmography as a whole. His Hollywood films are great, but not as good as his Kiwi stuff. I want Taika to do whatever he sets his mind to, but I do hope that involves coming back to New Zealand and film again.
I want to come back to New Zealand and do more films after that, and like local stuff that I want to do. But yeah, it's this is, I think that it doesn't really matter what happens in my life. I think I'll always try to create something.
He's an excellent director, and I can't wait for his future work.
My approach usually is just to look for the I think the emotional truth in the story, regardless of whether it's about a foster kid on the run from the army or about a boy who's obsessed with Michael Jackson or or some vampires living in a flat in Wellington. Like I really believe that if you base your story in some sort of emotional authenticity, then you're going to be okay.
I implore you to watch his films. They're all so exceptional.
Oh, stop talking.